I used to believe my silence was a kind of protection. Keep your head down, do the work, let others speak louder. That way, no one could use my voice against me. My voice, raspy, softer than most, had been the punchline since childhood. In classrooms, kids imitated it. As an adult, in office conference rooms, my boss, Gareth Holloway, turned it into his favorite inside joke. I sat at the end of the long mahogany table that morning in Boston, tapping notes into my laptop while Gareth raised a glass. Another record-breaking quarter. Flawless performance across the board, he said, teeth flashing beneath the overhead lights. Applause broke out. Not a single glance turned toward me. That flawless performance had been my sleepless nights. I'd patch servers at 3 a.m, slipping earbuds in while my daughter Lucia's recital livestream played quietly in the corner of my screen. I'd stopped a memory leak minutes before it would have collapsed a demo for our biggest client. I'd fixed more disasters than anyone would ever know, precisely because I caught them before they looked like disasters at all. And yet, Gareth thrived on my invisibility. He leaned back in his ergonomic chair, smirk curving, and asked in his mock rasp tone, "Amara, why didn't you think of this earlier?" The room chuckled. I forced a laugh, eyes on my notebook, and filed the sting away with the rest of them. That evening, when I got home to our cramped apartment in Somerville, Lucia was already asleep. I set down my bag, watered the little fern on the windowsill, and watched its leaves tremble under the droplets. That plant had survived 3 office relocations and winters when the heat barely worked. It was tougher than I felt. I whispered into the quiet. Funny how silence feels like safety until it starts to choke you. The next morning, I was back at my desk, reliable as always, coding with headphones on while others chatted about weekend plans. I was the one you called when the system went dark at 2 a.m. The one who knew which patch would save the launch, the one who never raised her voice but carried the company on her back. Gareth thought I was safe to mock, safe to dismiss. He didn't know that, under all that silence, something was shifting. And soon, it would break the surface. The next week, I sat in the glass conference room, a dozen executives lined up along the polished table. Charts and projections flashed on the screen, and when a flaw in the rollout plan appeared, I cleared my throat and spoke. My voice rasped, low but steady. If we adjust the allocation path, we could cut processing time by nearly 20%, before the numbers even settled in their heads. Gareth leaned forward, raised his eyebrows, and exaggerated my tone. "What if we just tweak this?" he said in a high, mocking rasp. Laughter broke out, nervous and awkward, but enough to sting. I felt my cheeks flush, though I kept my eyes on my notes. My suggestion, the actual solution, was already being scribbled into the action plan without my name attached. Inside, something sharp turned. For years, I'd convinced myself that being the quiet one, the dependable one, was safety. But in that moment, I realized silence was only feeding him. Later that week, at the company happy hour, Gareth clinked his glass and smirked. If Amara ever left, the system might wobble for 5 minutes before we replaced her with someone cheaper. The table erupted in forced laughter. I raised my glass, too, pretending it was funny, but the words burned. Cheaper, replaceable, disposable. I walked home through the Boston evening, air sharp with the scent of rain, my shoulders tight under the weight of everything I didn't say. When I unlocked the apartment, Lucia was already asleep. I poured water into the little fern on the windowsill, watching the droplets slide down its leaves. That plant had survived more than I cared to count drafty winters, relocations, neglect, and still, it grew. I pressed my fingers to the rim of the pot, steadying myself. I wasn't as fragile as Gareth thought. I wasn't replaceable. I was still here, still growing, even if no one cared to look. And in the days that followed, when the sting of his words echoed in my head, I began to wonder how long it would be before he pushed me too far. It was a Tuesday when the summons came, because bad news always seemed to favor Tuesdays. Gareth's assistant appeared at my desk with her tablet clutched like a script. "Daniel wants to see you in his office. HR will be there." Her tone was clipped, rehearsed, as if she were announcing a routine appointment. But we both knew. Boss plus HR wasn't a meeting. It was an execution. The walk to his office felt like crossing a stage. Keyboard slowed, voices hushed, and every pair of eyes flicked up long enough to register what was happening. By the time I reached the corner office, my stomach was calm in a way that felt almost alien. I already knew how the play ended. Gareth sat sprawled in his leather chair, one ankle crossed casually over the other, rehearsing nonchalance. Beside him, the HR rep balanced a folder on her lap, her smile the kind you wear when the verdict is already decided. "Let's get right to it," Gareth said smoothly, as if closing a deal. "We're restructuring, and unfortunately, that means we'll have to let you go." The HR rep slid the packet across the desk. "Effective immediately," she added, her voice firm with finality. Then came Gareth's flourish. He leaned forward, lips curving into that familiar smirk. "Pack your things, and don't forget that squeaky little voice when you beg for another job." The words landed harder than the folder in front of me. Not just termination, but mockery wrapped in dismissal. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I simply stood, collected the cardboard box HR offered, and placed my few belongings inside. My fern swayed with every step as security escorted me toward the elevator. Colleagues glanced up, then quickly backed down at their screens, pretending not to watch. The silent audience to the end of a show they'd seen coming. I kept my head level, my pace steady. No tears, no protests, just a whisper under my breath, low enough that only I could hear it. "You just stepped on the landmine." And I knew then the real story was about to begin. 2 years earlier, the apartment was dark except for the bluish glow of my battered old laptop. Lucia's soft breathing drifted from her room down the hall, steady as a metronome while I hunched over the kitchen table. Cold takeout cartons crowded the corner, my elbows resting on a spread of notebooks filled with sketches and half-baked formulas. The company's system had been groaning under years of quick fixes, each patch layered over the last like duct tape on a cracked pipe. Every time we scaled for a new client, costs ballooned, performance dragged, and Gareth smirked his way through another presentation about innovation. I couldn't turn it off in my head. The problem kept gnawing at me. That night, something clicked. The code I'd been chiseling at finally slid into place. I ran the test, watching the numbers crawl across the screen. 30% less resource usage. No loss of speed. My chest tightened, heart hammering as though I discovered a secret door in a house I thought I knew. I knew what I had. More importantly, I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't theirs. Every line was mine, written on my own hardware, my own time, my own sleepless nights. The next week, I filed a provisional patent in my name. Just a digital submission, a timestamp, a quiet email in my inbox. No applause, no smirk, just proof. For months, I said nothing, but I kept a record. Every product release, every feature Gareth paraded on stage that leaned on my framework, I logged it. Dates, versions, dependencies, screenshots of release notes, clips of conference speeches where Gareth gestured at diagrams I had drawn at this very table. Piece by piece, the folder grew thicker, heavier, a silent ledger of theft and arrogance. Each line I added felt less like protection and more like a nail hammered into the coffin Gareth didn't even realize he was building. And as I slid the folder back into my desk drawer, I already knew it wouldn't stay shut forever. The morning after I boxed up my career, I took the red line across the Charles into Cambridge. The city was waking up students rushing with backpacks, cyclists weaving through traffic, but I carried only one folder under my arm, heavy with years of sleepless nights. Victor Calder's office was tucked above a coffee shop on Massachusetts Avenue. The carpet still smelled faintly of cigarettes, the walls lined with filing cabinets that leaned like tired soldiers. He looked up from behind his desk, gray hair falling across his forehead, eyes sharp even in weariness. I slid the folder onto the desk. It's time. He opened it without a word, flipping page after page, timestamps, screenshots, provisional filings, conference clips. His brow furrowed, then softened into something like respect. Every line of code, written outside work hours, every line. I said, on my laptop, my commits, my timestamps. He leaned back, tapping the folder against his palm. Then it's airtight. What you have here isn't just protection. Amara. It's a landmine. Quiet until someone steps. The word landed in me like a spark in dry tinder. Landmine. That was exactly what it was. He straightened, more serious now. Once you file the full patent, they're already in violation. No wiggle room, no gray areas. They've built their castle on your foundation, and the moment you choose, you can pull it out from under them. I thought of Gareth's smirk, of his voice curling around the word cheaper, of the way he imitated my tone to draw laughter. The castle wasn't his. It never was. Victor slid the final draft toward me, the pen cool and heavy between my fingers. I signed, ink bleeding into paper like a quiet promise. When I left his office, the morning air was crisp, sunlight cutting through the chill. Students chattered, buses roared. The city moved as if nothing had changed. But I knew better. The landmine was set, and somewhere across the river, Gareth was still strutting through his glass office, never realizing he had already stepped on it. The live stream buffered for a moment, then filled my screen with the stage in San Francisco. Gareth stood at the podium, his suit gleaming under spotlights, his voice measured and confident. Behind him, slides flicked across the massive display, diagrams, charts. Even the bullet points I had once scribbled at my kitchen table lifted wholesale from my notes. This framework, he declared, pausing for effect, defines our future. It is the backbone of every success we've had this year. The audience clapped. Investors leaned forward, and his grin widened. I sat in my apartment, fists pressed against my knees, jaw tight enough to ache. He wasn't just standing on my work anymore, he was making himself the face of it. When the stream ended, I shut the laptop and found Lucia at the kitchen counter, bent over her math homework. She glanced up at me, eyes serious in a way that seemed too old for her age. "Mom," she said softly, "why do you let him talk like that?" The words cut deeper than Gareth's mockery ever had. She wasn't asking about patents or frameworks. She was asking about me, her mother, the woman she watched get erased, laughed at, humiliated. I crouched beside her, smoothing a stray curl from her forehead. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. I told her. Sometimes it's patience, but there comes a moment when patience has to end. That night, I sat alone at the same kitchen table where the idea had first taken shape. The folder lay open before me, the signatures still crisp, Victor's words echoing in my head. It's a landmine. Until now, I'd thought of it as protection, insurance against the worst. But looking at Lucia's closed bedroom door, hearing her steady breathing through the wall, I realized it was more than that. It wasn't about saving myself anymore. It was about teaching her that silence doesn't mean surrender. And for the first time, I knew I was ready to let the landmine explode. The decision weighed in my chest like a stone, but my hand was steady as I scrolled through my contacts. I stopped on a name I hadn't dialed in years, Elena Marquez, now vice president at Orion Systems. We'd met once at a Chicago conference, bonding over bad Wi-Fi and bitter coffee, and I remembered her sharp eye for opportunity. The line rang twice before her voice came through, warm but cautious. Amara, well, this is a surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure I've got something you'll want to see? I said. My throat tightened, but my words came clear. There was a pause, then a shift in her tone. Go on, I explained carefully. Piece by piece, the framework developed independently. The provisional filing, the full patent now secured in my name. Finally, I said what mattered most. They've built their core on top of it, for 18 months, without rights. Another pause, then her skeptical laugh. Are you sure it's clean? They'll tear this apart if there's a crack. I forwarded everything timestamps, logs, screenshots, the patent filings. My laptop hummed as the files uploaded, evidence of years condensed into megabytes. On the other end, I heard the faint rustle of papers as if she were flipping through them. It's clean, she murmured at last. Cleaner than I expected. We moved fast after that. The conversation shifted into terms exclusive licensing, immediate legal protection, non-disclosure. Elena didn't haggle, she knew speed was worth more than pennies. By midnight, Orion's legal team was drafting contracts. By 2 I had a signed agreement in my inbox. I leaned back in my chair. The apartment hushed except for the sound of Lucia's breathing down the hall. Fear and exhilaration pulsed together, the kind of rush that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. While Gareth slept under the illusion of control, the ground beneath his empire had already shifted, and when morning came, the world would see it crumble. The sun had barely cleared the skyline when my phone buzzed with the first alert. Orion Systems secures exclusive rights to breakthrough algorithm by Amara Velasquez. The headline glared back at me from every feed. Within an hour, trade journals, tech blogs, and LinkedIn posts were lit with the same story. I sipped my coffee, the steam curling into my face, and watched the chaos unfold. Reporters dissected every word of the release. Investors speculated in panicked threads. By mid-morning, Gareth's company stock had dipped sharply. Not catastrophic, but enough to send their PR teams scrambling. My phone kept buzzing screenshots from old colleagues, messages filled with disbelief. Is this you? How did you pull this off? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. By 10 o'clock, I received the first inside update. A friend from accounting texted, "CTO's on fire. Full floor can hear the yelling." Minutes later, another ping. "He's tearing into Gareth right now." I could picture it perfectly, the big glass conference room, blinds half drawn, coffee cups scattered across the table, the CTO's voice booming over speakerphone. "What I don't understand, Gareth, is why Amara Velasquez's name is on this patent and why, as of this morning, it's licensed exclusively to Orion." Silence, then Gareth fumbling. It was part of the documentation process. I supervised the CTO cut him off, fury spilling. "You insisted on attaching your name, and now every investor thinks you handed our core technology to the competition personally." That was the moment the room turned. Years of Gareth positioning himself as the face of innovation evaporated in an instant. He wasn't the visionary anymore. He was the traitor who had gift-wrapped the company's foundation for a rival. I leaned back in my chair, coffee cooling beside me, and let the weight of it sink in. The trap had snapped shut, and Gareth was finally inside it, and by noon, the headlines would sharpen into his undoing. By the next morning, the industry blogs had their headline, "From Innovation to Implosion, CEO Gifts Tech to Rival." The phrase spread like wildfire, copied and pasted across articles, tweets, and investor newsletters. For once, Gareth's name wasn't being celebrated. It was being dragged through the mud. Clients began calling, threatening to suspend contracts. Some demanded written assurances, others hinted at pulling out entirely. The company's investor hotline overflowed with furious questions. Stock prices slid deeper with every hour. The same board that had once applauded Gareth's every boast now hounded him with suspicion. An emergency meeting was called that afternoon. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. My friend in accounting sent a steady stream of texts. He's drenched in sweat, keeps fumbling papers. The board looks like they're circling for the kill. I pictured him at the head of the long table, shirt clinging under the heat of scrutiny, words failing him in the silence that followed every excuse. He tried to frame it as an oversight, claimed Orion's lawyers had blindsided them, insisted it was all a misunderstanding. But perception in a room like that is everything. And when the CTO replayed his own smug insistence on attaching his name to the innovation, the knife turned. By the end of 72 hours, Gareth was finished. The official statement read resignation, but everyone knew he had been pushed out, a scapegoat for a collapse no spin could hide, at home. I poured water into the soil of my fern, its leaves stretching higher toward the light. It had survived winters, neglect, and ridicule, yet it was thriving now, lush and alive. I stood there in the quiet, the chaos of the corporate world muted behind my walls. I hadn't shouted, hadn't begged, hadn't broken the law. I had simply waited, patient and steady, until arrogance detonated itself. And as the week ended, I realized victory didn't need noise. It only needed to last. The kitchen smelled of toast and coffee, the kind of ordinary morning that used to feel impossible when I was glued to server logs and late-night calls. Lucia sat across from me, her hair still tangled from sleep, spreading jam across her bread with the focus only a child can muster. She looked up suddenly, her eyes curious. "So it's really over. He can't hurt you anymore." I nodded, sipping from my mug. "It's over." He mocked my voice. "Remember." But that same voice signed the patent that ended him. Her smile was small but proud, and it reached deeper than any headline. For years, she'd seen me bent over laptops, exhausted, invisible, swallowing humiliation I never explained. Now she saw me steady, lighter somehow. That was the victory no article could capture. I didn't post cryptic messages on social media. I didn't brag to old colleagues. Let Gareth's downfall be narrated by investors, journalists, and the board that had once worshipped him. My triumph didn't need an audience. After breakfast, I walked Lucia to school. The Boston air was brisk, sunlight cutting through the trees, each breath filling me with something I hadn't felt in years' ease. I wasn't rushing to put out a fire or patch a broken system. My time was mine again. When I returned home, I paused by the window. The fern stood tall in its pot, leaves lush and reaching toward the light. The same plant Gareth had once turned into a punchline was thriving, alive. Proof that what endures quietly can outlast every smirk and insult. I touched the rim of the pot, the soil damp from last night's watering, and felt something settle in me. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't roar or demand applause. It simply waits, patient and steady, until the moment comes to speak. And sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that rewrites the ending.